Hello and welcome back to another Artisfy codecast. This is a midnight codecast, so it's a little bit of a special. I'm going to continue where I left off last time, which is working with the input and output.js code using real live Artisfy code. And we ran into a minor problem, so let's look at that. So in our last video, so we didn't have this yet. So we have two choices here, two data input choices. One represents the type choice, the other one down here represents the size choice. Each of them is an object and they're going to output something that looks like this. So we have type, and then we have the type, so something like that. And then this other one down here for the size is going to output something like size 1. So, this works well enough, but the problem is when we're syncing the data. So we realized pretty quickly that, so if I refresh the page, oh geez, what did I do wrong? Oh, I did the comment wrong. Okay. So I guess maybe we can, no. Okay, well we'll just delete these comments for now. I don't know how to handle them. Okay, so for syncing the data, so we have this first timeline item. We choose discuss and we choose size 4. If we save, we're going to get the size, but the discuss type isn't being transferred over to the element it's supposed to sync with. Now, the reason this is happening, and I had to think this over a little bit, but the reason this is happening is because if we look at our output.js function, the main function is this get data from root node function. And if the element that it's currently looking at can't be parsed, it's going to skip this whole loop where it parses and gets the data. And the parent data and the root data isn't going to be set. And then it's going to go through each of the children and have its own context for the parent data. So then each of these children are going to define, and here's the real problem, they're going to both overwrite the root data because there's going to be no parent data on each of them. So if you can imagine on the parent element at the very top, that's not going to have any attribute that can be parsed, so our function isn't going to do anything. And then it's going to have two children below that, and both children are going to try to set the root data. And so this one's going to set the root data, and then this one's going to set the root data, and this one's going to win because it did it last. And so that's what we're seeing here is, actually this is trying to sync, because it's trying to set its data, but then this one's just coming along and setting its data afterwards. So I was thinking, what can I do here? Well, it seems like the main problem is that this parent data is being redefined in every loop, in every iteration. So I'm going to just think out loud here and try to work through this. What if I define parent data up here and I delete that parent data and I delete this parent data? So I'm no longer passing it in to this get data from DOM function, and I'm defining it out here. And the idea is that this parent data is going to be redefined on every iteration of the loop. And the root data is always going to remain, the first iteration of the loop. So let's just go through an example here, and let's use like a standard case. So actually, first of all, I just want to show you a quick solution for all of this. So if I all I have to do is on the parent element, on the on the form, all I have to do is paste this in. So this data output type list is going to get around all of our problems. So it's going to just create a list around both objects, right? So we can have the type feedback, and we can have the size of 1, because the list is going to be around it. But what I'm thinking is, okay, that's great, and like this isn't that much to ask from someone, you know, to allow the data to be parsed correctly. But I'm just curious, can we simplify this a little bit so that the output.js function doesn't require us to wrap, you know, the data up neatly like this? Maybe it'll be a little forgiving, and if there's no wrapper element, it'll just create the kind of basic element, the basic object, right, the first time around. And then, you know, if there's no other option for it, it's just going to add to that object, right? So we'll get a flat object if we don't have this, you know, list container, right? So that's ideally what I want, but I want to make sure we don't run into any side effects that have unintended consequences, you know, with that kind of code. Okay, so let's run through like our standard case where we're gonna have like a list, and then that's gonna have children. Okay, so the list is gonna be parsable. It's gonna be able to be parsed. Okay, so we're gonna get this. We're gonna say it can be parsed. There's not gonna be any parent data existing yet. I shouldn't put this here. I don't know. I'll just put it here. Okay, and then it's going to get the parent data, which is going to, you know, just equal a list, right? It's just going to be an array. That's all, an empty array. And then it's going to set the root data to this empty array. And then it's going to go through all the children, and it's going to say, okay, get the data from the DOM. So it's going to call this this function over again. Okay. So then we're going to go through the child element. So now our child element is going to be an object in this example. So it's going to have the data dash output dash type equal to object. So this time the element is again going to be able to be parsed. We're going to have the parent data already set because we set it in the last iteration. And so we're going to add the data from the current from this element to the data object, which is the parent element. So we're going to get something like this, which is what we expect. And then we're going to go to the next iteration. And oh yeah, so parent data in this case is going to be, so this is going to be the root data. And the parent data, so at this point, the root data is going to be this, and the parent data, unfortunately, is going to be equal to this part. because the way this works is it's going to return. So if parent data is an object, so it's gonna, okay, yep. So it's gonna push the object into the list if it's a list, and then it's gonna return the object. So this is what we're gonna have for parent data. Now that's a problem, right? Because now when we do our next iteration, so we're gonna have, you know, a second child, right? And then that's all also, we'll just say, that's also going to be an object. When we go to parse it, we're going to say, okay, it can be parsed. Parent data does exist. And it's equal to this. And so what it does in that case, if it doesn't have a key of its own, it's just going to merge with this. So we'll get something like this. Sorry. What is it? Size? Size is 1. And the expected output in this case is not this, right? Because we have a list that's wrapping objects that are next to each other, but that doesn't mean we want them to merge together. That's not what we expect. We want, at this point, we would have rather kept parent data the list. So I guess, yeah. I mean, it makes it a lot more complicated actually to do it this way. So let's see if we can, let's go back. So I guess one thing I'm thinking is that we could try to do it that way, and then we'd have to try to keep track of, let's see, what would we have to keep track of? So if we pass, I'm actually not sure. So something about the hierarchy or where we are in the hierarchy, I think we would have to keep track of. But let's see if there's another way we can do this. So the issue is that that on the second iteration, so the case we're going through now, that we want to fix, it's not really broken. This is actually working exactly how we want it to. But let's just say it's a parent that's unparsable, and then it has children, and we'll just say it's 2 children, and they're both objects. So it goes through the parent, it's not parsable, right? So nothing gets set. The parent data doesn't get set, the root data doesn't get set. I guess one option is that, okay, so if the absolute parent element can't be parsed, we could default to like having it be something, right? So we could just say like, okay, if that parent data can't be parsed, we're going to default to it being a list or something. I don't really like that. I like a more explicit statement, so or explicit code. So let's see. It might end up that we just go back to using the simple solution, right? Which is just using this data output type list. But I just want to see, okay, is there another solution? So here, we're going to go through the first child. It can be parsed. It doesn't have parent data. So it's going to set this up and this up. So now on our, and I don't know if this is the right way to do it. I guess that's fine, right? So this root data is going to be set at this point. So maybe this is our mistake, right? Okay, so now let's go through the next loop. So now we're on object number 2, and we see, okay, it can be parsed, and we're checking to see if we have parent data, and we don't. So we're assuming that it's the original data if there's no parent data. And I think instead what we might be able to do is down here say, hey, if there's no root data, I guess we would also need to know that there's a parent data at this point. So like, let's say if there is parent data at this point and there's no root data, then set the root data to parent data. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to have to pause. Okay, sorry about that. So I'm recording so many of these codecasts that I regularly run out of space at this point, but I think I just freed up at least another 20 minutes of time. Okay, so if we do that, we would comment this out. And so we would only set root data if there is parent data and there's no root data. So let's see what would happen there. So if we go through, and by the way, this is like the primary reason why you have automated tests, is that you don't have to go through all these scenarios in your head. You've already written them out once, and you're just, making sure things work as expected. So yeah, I kind of really wish that I had tests right now. But yeah, really wishing doesn't really get you there. Okay, so let's just brainstorm this. So everything should work the same up until so let's say the first child goes through, it's not going to have the parent data, so it's going to create the parent data. And then at this point it's going to have the parent data. Yeah, I mean the only case this happens, or should happen, is in here. So let's get rid of that and just say and no root data. Okay, so it's not going to have the root data on the first child, and then it's going to set the root data equal to the parent data. So that makes sense. So in this case, root data is going to be this object that has, for example, type equals feedback. Okay, now let's go through the second child. So the second child's going to come to parent data. It's not going to have parent data either, so it's going to go here. It's going to set the parent data. It's going to set the parent data equal to something like type is 1, and then only if it doesn't have root data, it's going to overwrite it. So it won't overwrite it, but it's also not going to extend it. And the reason it's not going to extend it is because it didn't, it's only going to extend it if it has parent data. So the way this works currently is that it's very strict in its hierarchy. If what we have right here is orphaned children, right? We have one guy over here and one guy over here, or I don't know, one person over here, one person over there. What do we do with them? right? It just doesn't make sense. There's no explicit definition for what we should do with them. I think ideally we would throw them both on a list, just automatically. And uh, I mean, my first thought actually is that, well, they're both orphaned. They're just kind of, sitting in space. We actually don't know how we should handle them because the code hasn't explicitly said how to handle them, right? They're just like random, just data nodes. So the code should break. But then the second thought is, well, if I have this data node and I have this data node, and I told it to parse the entire parent, then I am kind of expecting to get both those data nodes. So if I'm being forgiving to myself, I'm putting those in a list together and just kind of assuming that they belong together. But I'm not merging them because if I have this orphan over here and this orphan over here, I'm not like trying to merge them, right? Obviously, I would only think about merging them if I purposefully put them closer together or something. Um, or like had like a specific instruction to merge them. Okay, so that being said, um, I guess the question is, can we automatically create a list parent data that will only activate if we have an orphan? If we have more, more than one route that we're going down at the same time. And I guess the way to tell if we have more than one route that we're going down at the same time is okay. So let's keep this case here. So the way to tell that we have more than one route that we're going down at the same time is if RouteData is defined here, or here, right? So we could say, like if you get here and there's, uh, you know, so if you get here, if there's no parent data, and then we say, but we have a RouteData already, right? Then, then actually, we're gonna, uh, we can like see, okay, is RouteData an object? Or, so in this case, RouteData is going to be equal to the object, the first object we parsed. I guess we could throw them both in a list no matter what. So we could say like RouteData equals this. And I guess the first thing we could say is like um, temp data, like temporary data, is equal to RouteData. And then RouteData is the object. And then RouteData push temp data. And then um, like this, I guess. And we would have to define parent data before this. So we would say like parent data equals RouteData. And then we would do this, and then else we would do this code here. Okay, so in this case, what we're saying is, hey, if you don't have parent data, but you do have RouteData, that means that you're an orphan, right? because that means like you're looking all the way up and there's no data for you. There's nothing up there, right? But you're but you do really have root data. There has been something defined that someone else has already defined. So, you know, it's over there, right? So you want to unify with that, you know, that element's data over there, and kind of bring your data together into one. And we know that you're in this situation because you don't have any parent data, right? Which means that, like, yeah, you're just an element, right, that is the first one to be parsed. So we're like going level by level, right? And we're saying, well, in all the levels above you, there was no data to be parsed, right? And and if there's root data defined right now, then something went wrong, right? There was something um, that someone else already got parsed, and their data is in the system, and we don't want you to overwrite their data. But it's important that you respect that there's already data been established, and we're gonna just kind of majigger things, reconfigure things a little bit, and make sure that you end up including yourself without overwriting what they've done. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what this is trying to do. So I guess the thing to think through is there ever a case where what I said isn't true, right? Is there a case where you wouldn't have parent data, but you would have root data, where you wouldn't want to automatically create some new root data? And I think that ideally what I'm doing here, if I do write this code, is I'm saying, hey, please be explicit. If you're explicit with what's happening here, this case is never going to come up. You're never going to run into an issue where you don't have parent data and you do have root data, because you will have always defined a parent that's at the root of everything else. And if you have a list of objects, that root data structure is going to have to be a list, because you're going to want to put all those other objects next to each other in that list. Or it could even be an object, right? If each of those sub-objects have keys of their own, so like say you have like a person, right? And you have their address data, and you have their, I don't know, food preferences data, and you have their, you know, uh, purchases data, then you might have like a root object, and then you might have like purchases colon, and then a list, right? Something like that, right? So anyways, um, if you haven't done that, if you haven't set that up, we're just going to say in this case, hey, we understand you might have just wanted to quickly run through this, and give yourself the ability to not write explicit instructions. It's not ideal, but we're still going to give you something back that kind of makes sense and doesn't overwrite itself. And I think that is this case. So I think this would work. Now, the problem I see here is that we're potentially rewriting some code with this line. And ideally, I don't want to do that. But it is a special case. So let's see. Special case. Okay, so we'll say like handles special case. This is orphan data that would have overwritten root data that already exists. In order to prevent overwriting this data, we automatically create some parent data that can automatically contain them both. Okay, so I guess I'm going to try this. And it's unfortunate because this does complicate our code. Create new parent data. Yeah, I mean, this is really annoying. I think I'm tempted, very tempted to just go with this. It's explicit. We know exactly what we're going to get. This does save us a little bit of, thinking and processing. And I mean, I guess the key thing for me is that, okay, so like if we're just trying to parse the DOM for data, this function, get data from root node, already works perfectly. I love it. It makes perfect sense. However, that's not what we're trying to do right now. So we've kind of gerrymandered this function into part of a synchronization function also. And so it's serving two purposes right now. So I guess, one option would be like, passing in a like is forgiving option. And then like, if it's forgiving and there's root data here, then we'll do something, right? And so then normally we're not going to pass in the is forgiving argument because we're going to expect people to be explicit about how they're defining their data in the DOM. But we do pass it in when we're just synchronizing data. Because the idea here, so like why do I need a data output type list here, right? Because really, if you look at this code, it doesn't make sense to have it here. All I'm trying to do is, oh, and that shouldn't even be there. That should be on the block. Jeez. Where is that? Oh man, it's like, okay. There we go. Okay, so like it shouldn't even be here because all we're trying to say is that, hey, so this data in here is going to sync. It's going to synchronize with the other data. And so I just thought like one option would actually be to have the output.js function automatically parse this attribute as a data output list, which kind of makes sense but kind of doesn't. You know, it's again, it's that kind of like explicit, non-explicit thing, and I would rather people be explicit. Um, so anyways, and by the way, my opinion on, not that you care, but my opinion on explicit versus um, not explicit code, like, is that if you are smart enough to make an intuitive library, there is no reason to be explicit. I think jQuery, for example, is a beautiful example of that, and there's other code that's a good example of that. But jQuery feels like magic sometimes. If you get used to its programming style and you get used to the way it does things, it is a little opinionated, you know, especially in the way that it kind of silently, you know, ignores error cases, you know, or like if you select an object and it doesn't exist and then you call a bunch of methods on it, in a lot of cases it's not going to care. It's going to be like, yeah, I couldn't do that. There was no object, but you know, whatever. And that's kind of nice. There's a nice thing about that. So what I think about that is that like if you can do magic, if you can make a truly intuitive piece of code, go for it and don't force people to be explicit because that's going to be a pleasure to work with as a human being. However, as a nice fallback, human beings do have this like very logical side to their brains. Um, you know, at least some of them do. And they can kind of fall back to that as kind of, you know, oh, this library or this code is just going to require me to be very, you know, meticulous about what am I doing and how it, and I have to kind of think through how is it actually going to interpret this, right? Google in its early days was a great example of this because you could, you know, just Google something like, I don't know, like I don't even know what to say. But you know, it was like simple questions, right? But if you worded them correctly, you would get much better results. And it's still like that, but they've cut down on that a lot. You know, it's gotten more magical as time has gone on, and it's kind of learned from the behaviors of people. But anyways, it's too much too much to talk about. Okay, so anyways, to get to the the magic of this library, um, so if all I'm trying to do is say, okay, in this data input sync element, I just want to sync all of the data with these other um, output objects that are, you know, in the rest of the page. And so all I really want to do is say, hey, this matches up with the other one that has the same name, the same key name as it. And hey, this one, it matches up with this key name. And that's all. So why do I need to say, why do I need to care about the way this is going to be parsed and explicitly define these, you know, data objects as part of a list? I don't care about that. All I'm saying in this circumstance is sync these, you know, keys, right? Sync this key and sync this key with the other keys. I don't care how the data is outputted. That doesn't matter to me in this case. So what do I do? Well, I think, okay. So since we are compiling everything down to a flat object, and I don't think there's going to be any lists in here, but you know, I wouldn't want to limit myself that way. Okay, what I could do is I could default the data input sync to a list or an object, whatever I decide. Probably an object, right? So by default, it would automatically assume this was the value. And then I could also allow passing in a list option here. And so if I just left this value off altogether, it's going to assume it's an object. And so then I wouldn't have to put this on there. And then in here, I would say um, I don't know. I'll just say like is for sync here. That's not actually what I would say, but I would say is for sync, or no. Yeah. So I would say is for sync, and then my can element be parsed, would be a little bit different, right? So I would say, if is for sync, and then I'd have like another can element be parsed, and this would be like, data I sync, and I don't know, I would have like an or there, right? This isn't actual code, but you kind of get the gist of it, and then yeah, and then I don't know, I would pass. I don't know. It's stupid. I don't want to do it. But yeah, I could do it, right? And then in the normal case, I would only parse these, but in other cases, I would parse this thing. Okay. Well, okay, let's go back to the more, I think the scenario I like a little bit better, which is not having this is forgiving thing, but just saying like, hey, if you're an orphan, we're gonna still handle your case. Um, and I also like the idea of putting this in a separate place. So let's get all this code. We can take this out of the else. And we're going to do it down here. And, we're going to have RouteData defined here. So we're going to have to say so parent no, we can't do that, right? I mean, can we detect this case anymore down here? I mean, ParentData is going to have just been defined. So we can't actually tell the difference between this case and this case anymore. Okay, we'll leave it up here. I don't know. Okay, so I guess the question is, do we do this, right? So we would have, let me write out the code. Temp data equals RouteData, RouteData equals empty array. We push the temp data in there. We set the parent data equal to the root data. Yeah. And then we and then we get we add the data from the current element to the parent data that we just established as the root data, which is going to be a list. So what we've done here is we've said Um, oh, this is, yeah, that runs, that's a major problem, right? If, yeah, so now if we have, okay. I mean, it's just kind of fun trying to figure this out. I'm actually not sure if I'm going to include this at all. I don't think I will, but it's just kind of fun to think about. So what if I have three guys here, right? So now in that case, when I'm going through the third one, the parent data isn't going to be defined, but the root data is going to be defined. So then we're going to do this again, right? So if we do this again, we're going to end up double nesting the, so root data in that case is going to look like this, and then, the original object, right? So it's going to be like type feedback, and then the next one is going to be, what is it, size 1, and then, so this is what we're going to have for root data, and then we're going to say, okay, well, temp data is going to equal that. We're going to set a new array that's root data, and then we're going to push this into that. So, we're going to have this double nested array. And then we're going to set the parent data equal to the root data. So it's going to be equal to this. And then we're going to add the data from the element to the data object. So then we're going to get a comma, and then like, I don't know, whatever this thing could be. I'll just, I don't know, say something random. So it's going to be this other thing, this other field. And what I would really want is that not to happen. So the other option, would be to say no. If it's an to say no, if it's an orphan, just merge it in. Right? So if we already have root data established, then whatever to all that, except for this. Well, I guess it would just be this. So, yeah, so we would say, okay, if you have already parsed something, so you have type feedback, and that's over there, then, and you have this new one that is, an orphan, right? So you have this new piece of data, it's an orphan. So basically it looks like this, right? This is exactly what it looks like. Is we've got this guy over here, we've got this guy over here, and we don't know how they're connected because they don't have any parent. And the root data is right now set to this, but it's not actually root data. It doesn't represent the root data because it's not inclusive, right? It's not actually a parent to this. So these guys, this could be a sibling to this element, right? So it's kind of lying about its root data status. It's by accident that it's been set to root data. So it can either say, okay, well, I care about that or I don't care about that. And I think the good thing to do is to say, well, even though this is an unfortunate situation and we have two orphans, we're gonna care and we're gonna merge them together. So we're gonna say, okay, now we're just gonna say parent data is equal to adding the data from the current element to the root data. So then what we're going to get is these guys merge. And so you might ask, well, okay, what if this other guy isn't an object? What if it's a data output type list? Well, then we're going to get this from this. And let's see what happens with that. I think it just doesn't know how to handle it. So is parent data otherwise? So it is an object. Parent data is an object. If it has a key, then that's fine. But in this case, it doesn't have a key. We're pretending. So we actually just assume that it's an object in that case. We don't allow for the possibility of a list being inside of an object without that list having a key to associate itself with that object. And, normally it's not going to have one. So in that case, it's just, then you'll run into an error. And that's just, hey, sorry, you shot and you missed. But it will handle this case with the actual data objects, which is really what I care about. So in that case, it's going to say, hey, I understand you made a mistake, or maybe you didn't, right? Maybe you're just writing some synchronization code. So we're just going to put you guys together. Maybe that's not exactly what you intended, but you're going to get your data back. And it's all going to be there. We're not overwriting anything. So let's say instead of letting orphan data overwrite root data, merge it in with the current root data. Okay, and now if we don't have this list thing and we refresh, and let's refresh more than once, we open this and we change this to blue and we change this to 4, it works. Okay. So I don't know, I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a pretty good compromise. Yeah, I like that compromise. And I am going to switch this up a tiny bit because this is the default case. So that's the one I want to emphasize. And then I'll put that one down there. And we can put this here. So if there's no root data, so if there's no parent data, I guess we can do this. If there's no parent data and there's no root data, do this default stuff. And then we'll say like else if there's no parent data and there's root data, then we want to do this case. And so that makes it, I think, a little bit clearer that, hey, this is the default case that we're going to do, but we are allowing for this special case. And we'll say, instead of letting orphan data overwrite the root data, merge it in with the current root data. So the normal case is that on our, on our first run through, we're not going to have parent data, we're not going to have root data. That's natural, but we are allowing for the case where we don't have parent data, but we do have root data, and that's the orphan case. Okay. Okay. And let's just confirm that that works. And let's also copy this function and put it into, we have a parse data thing, parse DOM, because we have a test in here, and I just want to make sure that all my tests passed. JS parse DOM main. Hopefully, I think this is, oh, it uses data X type. I think it's mostly the same though, except for that. So I think if I just change that, we should be fine. Okay, so let's, is there something we have to do in here? No. We have no compilers, no webpack. It's so nice. I think so. Pass, pass, pass. And let's just make sure that we're using our new code. I mean, how could we not, right? But I don't know. Let's just, I've been proven wrong before. So let's just make sure. Yep, we got a bunch of 1, 2, 3s. Okay, awesome. And let's see, how long did that take? 31 milliseconds, that's fine. Not ideal, but it's fine. Okay, so yeah, we kind of tested that. We think it still works, how the old code works. It's 7 tests. It's not, amazing, but it's much, much better than nothing, and I'm relatively satisfied. Okay, so let's get to editing the rest of these timeline items, right? So let's first go into here. Did we delete this? Or what is this? Yeah, we deleted that up there. I guess we added a space after that. Whatever. What did we change? Oh, that's just the dist folder. Okay, well, yeah, that's fine. Okay, and then we're gonna go, where is it? Did we change anything here? No. Right? So it's just in, well, let's check input.js. No, output.js. Okay. So we can say like made this function forgiving of orphaned data. Okay, and now the question is, do we want to code that way or do we want to code the explicit way? Just because we added the ability, to have orphan data, does that mean that, we don't want to, create, like, yeah, well, the answer is, let's use the feature we just built. Okay, so, so we got that. Let's finish this stuff. So we got form timeline block. So we got this stuff kind of working. I forget exactly where we left off. Oh, okay, this is where we left off. So we got feedback, we got the key size of 2. Let's get the other things working. Well, let's get the close button working, right? Where's my close button? switch stop, or no, sorry, it's going to be switch actions, and it's going to be for the timeline and the legend. Bundle, timeline, bundle, legend, off, off. And we'll put this on a new line. So now if we open this, we can close it. Awesome. Okay, so now, okay, so the reason this stuff isn't working is because we have all the wrong attributes on it. So actually, let's finish one full timeline, because right now we can't edit the text here. So let's get that working first. So I guess we can just copy all this stuff. Data switch actions, timeline block text, that's a perfectly fine name. Backdrop activate. We want to copy the position, and we want a shift of 0 and -10. Oh, and we want to copy the width. Okay, so this is going to be a copy layout, and we just say width. And because we just have the position target, we don't have the dimensions target. And let's search for this. So this is going to be timeline block text. So we want to replace this with our form. Well, let's keep that. Okay, so we'll just do dot form underscore underscore timeline block text. I just want to make sure, yeah, that's in line with what we're doing there. So we can replace this here. And yeah, I mean, this is getting a little tiring, to be honest. Okay, so we've got the type object, we've got key and the size. Okay, so I think this is all good. I think we can delete this. And we're also going to have primary text and secondary text. And these are both going to be locations. So it's going to be like this. And it's going to default to inner text. So that should work. And I guess we could wonder, well, why don't we just create, like make both of these elements objects? And the reason is just because this is simpler. It's just simpler to do it here. It's less code, less verbose, and it just kind of tidies everything up. But yeah, I mean, we could have made them objects, and then maybe we wouldn't even have needed, you know, this kind of selector idea. Okay, so let's do that, and then let's go down to our form that we just created, and let's do my favorite thing in the world, which is not my favorite thing in the world, but okay, so we got the active class inline edit. So we want this to be the switches, data switches, and this is going to be, I forget what it's called. I honestly do, I'm sorry. so it's timeline block text. Timeline blocks text and backdrop, right? Or no, it's just timeline block text. And it's auto and inline edit, and we also want to sync on it. Okay, auto and inline edit, and we want the data input sync. And we have this input. We have the prevent, so we want to stop on this input. We can delete this value. Data switch stop is going to be this thing, and backdrop. Okay, and the buttons, we're just going to move, or no, we don't need that on this button. We don't need that anymore. We don't need an href on a button. Put the type on a new line. We'll move this to the end and replace that. We don't need any actions on this. I'll leave the href there. And then we want to do data switch stop. Or I forget if we keep that. Do we keep that? Data I save. No, we don't. We just have a save. Okay, so maybe that works. Oh, well, we're not syncing anything yet because we don't have any data. Okay, so we'll do data, what is it, O type object and data O key primary text empty. Okay, so refresh this, open this, click here. It didn't sync. So let's go back up to here. Data O key primary text and data O key primary text. Oh, that's right. So it's dot value. Okay. Okay, awesome. And that works. So now we can edit the primary text, but the problem is we can't edit the secondary text. And I talked with someone recently who made a really good point. They're like, well, when I click on the timeline item, I kind of want to be able to edit the type, the size, as well as the primary text, as well as the secondary text, all at the same time. So I guess the question for me is, well, do I want that too? I kind of do, but I kind of don't. I'm kind of fine with how it is. So I guess, yeah, I kind of want this to be edited separately. This is kind of like its own little thing, right? And then the primary text is here. And I guess what I would be okay with is if we had another input here, and then this was the secondary text. But I don't think this is going to look right. Oh, that's okay, right? That's not bad. I didn't imagine it was going to turn out okay. So capture idea 3, today 7. Oh my goodness. How cool is that? It just feels so good. So if you're curious, like, why am I going through all of this work when there are already libraries out there that do all this for you? There's Vue.js, there's React, there's, Mithril, there's all kinds of libraries that their sole purpose is to make data syncing simple, right? Everything's reactive. And the idea here is that not everything's reactive. That's the whole point of what I'm building here, is that I just want the ability to create a website that loads like that, right? So it's server rendered, and then on top of that server rendered is this kind of magic that lets you have most of the power of a front-end library with much less code than you would normally need. Um, and so it feels natural, it feels great, and it's easy to build. You don't have to get into the nitty-gritty. You can work with the natural DOM, you can store data in the DOM. So you don't have to run into you don't have to learn about the event stream, you don't have to keep updated with the latest React tooling. But it's not really about that. It's not about the React tooling. It's the fact that with React and with Vue and with Meteor, like I used Meteor, a few years ago, and the problem I ran into is that you have to load everything at the very start. And I know they have server-side rendering, so that now, but it's hard to set up. And I'd click on a new page in the route, and it wouldn't scroll to the right position, so it wouldn't go back to the top. And I know it allows you to do this cool stuff where you can have like page transitions and stuff, but none of that is worth it, in my opinion, for just the natural benefits that you get from a web application that actually behaves like a web page. You load a page, and it just loads and it works how it's supposed to. And you don't have to think about all of the tooling stuff that goes on top of it. And most importantly, you're not loading, you know, 20 pages and React and a bunch of React plugins, um, on top of your images and everything else. And I know honestly that there's ways of optimizing those things, right? You can, dynamically load your images. So as you scroll the page, images start loading. You can, have a code bundler that's gonna like remove dead code and like only include the bare necessities, and you can like split it up by page and you can optimize all that stuff. But I don't want to. I don't want it like as a solo developer or as a developer working on a small team. I just want to think about boom, this very simple thing, and I want to be able to make changes quickly. And that's what this library is all about: is making changes quickly, not thinking about this whole ecosystem that's developing right now, which is basically entirely aimed at rebuilding the automatic features of a web browser in JavaScript. I don't want to deal with that. It doesn't seem like the future to me, um, just kind of in a general sense. And I think the future is like web browsers eventually building stuff that, you know, helps web applications. Because like the web as it was built, over the past few decades, I'm sorry I'm going on a rant, but it was built for web pages, right? It was built for something like, Wikipedia, right? Um, or like the New York Times, right? Where you like it's an informational source. You're going to a web page, it's linked to another web page, you know. But it wasn't meant for these like very dynamic, interactive web applications. And so I think eventually the browsers are going to catch up, especially now that, Google has Chrome and they're the most popular browser and Google is very heavily invested in web applications, I think that, it's going to make a lot of progress very quickly. And there's going to be web components and there's going to be the shadow DOM and there's going to be all kinds of, crazy, awesome data syncing features just kind of built in. because I think people are getting tired of loading these gigantic libraries, every time they want to see something, especially if you're in a different country or on a phone. You got to think about, being on the train and waiting forever for that one web page, and you just want to see this tiny bit of information on this web page. You just want to like load up your email client and just see, did you get that new email from that job you just applied to? And that's important to you is that you see that image, that little email, and like who it was from, and like the first line, right? You just want to peek at it, you just want to see it, and it's just loading and loading and loading, and it's because you're on the train, and it's because it's trying to load this whole framework on top of everything else. So yeah, the idea behind these libraries is that you can just load things instantly, you can build things quickly. It's like a compromise between all of the things I see out there, while allowing you to do server rendering, so it's quick, so you get all the benefits of the natural DOM. You can interact directly with the DOM. So it's ambitious, but I think if I can just use it, and I don't really care about, if I don't care too much about developing it to fit with other people's workflows, I think I can be happy, I can develop it, and maybe I can bring some ideas to other libraries in the future. That would be my hope. I don't want to build the next React, I just want to build something that makes me a little bit happier and a little bit more productive. Um, okay, so if we set this to gold, which who knows what the heck that means, it doesn't work. So let's fix that. So I think we have a type in here, or no, it would be data o, okay, data o key. Do we have other ones? Just, oh, okay, here. So we did discuss, okay, and now we have gold, pink, green, and purple. Let's replace these, and let's look for any other golds. Okay, we do have them, and I think this, yeah, that's in the legend. Okay, and that's the only other place. Okay, so let's go see what gold means. So let's go into the legend. And we've got feedback, discussion. The next one is research. The next one is focus. The next one is payment. And then the final one is revision. And let me just see if that syncs up with my memory. So research was gold, focus was pink, payment is green, and revision is purple. Yep, that's perfect. Okay, so what did I do? I don't forget why these have colors on them, but I'm sure there's a good reason. Okay, so now if I do, oh wait, I have to refresh. So now if I do pink, it works. I wasn't sure if that would actually work. This is exciting. This is kind of like seeing something really cool come together. I'm actually really happy with this at this point. I'm sure there's going to be major problems that are going to cause me to like lose my mind, because I'm going to have to like rewrite the input.js library or the output.js library. But for now, this feels really cool to use. I'd say if I have one wish, it would be to, when I run into one of those problems, just kind of fudge it to get by instead of rebuilding the whole library, just so I can get Artisfy out the door And then I can come back to this later, ideally, years from now, and like rewrite it then. But I think, I can mostly get by with this, maybe a few small alterations to the libraries. That would be awesome. I would really, really, really like that. Because yeah, it's just annoying when you have to. Because I think right now, the danger is that I'm going to get attached to things feeling so good and so natural. I'm going to be like, I have to stick to that no matter what. Like if things don't feel this natural in the future, that's a bad sign. But I think that's a lazy goal to get attached to, because I think it's like sticking with what you're comfortable with. Like I like building libraries. I like just building code. I don't know how to run a successful company, you know? So um, that's the scary one. So I hope I face my fear instead of focusing on what's going to make, my limited life easier. I hope I focus on like the growth, right? The like expansion of my life and my abilities instead of instead of kind of sticking with what I'm comfortable with. And yeah, I mean it's more than that. It's also just about like, I mean it's about focus, but it's really when it comes down to it, it's about priorities. It's about like seeing the bigger picture, you know, and kind of being dedicated to that bigger picture, even if it's hard at times. Okay, so what I did just right there is I just got this view full timeline to also work, and this close full timeline to also work. Okay, so now let's make these other timeline items work. But before we do that, um, what did I do here? Oh, okay, that's nice that that's automatic. Okay, so I don't know, getting the timeline edit working. Yeah, so let's do a couple more of these. We have timeline item. So I'm just going to paste this. Just because this code is so much different than this code, I would rather just paste it in and then fill in the stuff that we need instead of like altering this at this point. So um, so I think it's the same size. I think it's a different type. So the type is going to be discuss. I think this is the same, and this is the same. Oh, except for the actual text. Yeah, the DOM's the same, but the text is different. Okay, so let's do that and see what happens. So if we refresh, boom, we got that. We can change this. That feels so smooth. Okay, so now we got that. Let's copy this a few more times. So we'll do this for the next one. For the next one, we got a size of 2. Yeah, so this is going to be converted to size of 1, and that's not user editable. The size of 1 is not user editable. It's the size that's below the user editable size. You'll see what I mean in a second. Okay, so this one is payment. And then we're not going to have text primary and text secondary for this, but I am going to leave them in. I'm just going to, I'll just say like to delete, but I'll show you why I'm going to do that too. Oh, and there's going to be something a little bit different in here. So we're going to have this timeline block icon inside of the timeline block. Okay, so actually this one's a lot different. Yeah. So what I was thinking is that, okay, I don't want to show these. So what I was thinking is, you know, if it's the type of payment, let's select these and display none on them. But we'll allow them to still be there. Just so like each item has as similar, you know, of a DOM structure as possible. And I think that just makes it easier to work with. Yeah, so I'm running out of disk space. 1 second. Okay, so I'm almost done with this. Yeah, let me just think. What do I want to do here? So the problem is that I actually, if like this type was on the parent timeline item, I would be much more comfortable using it to select this. But as it is, I'd have to use a sibling selector, which is fine, but it's just not as reliable. You know, if you change the DOM around, most likely you're going to leave the parent as the parent. And you know, you're gonna pay some attention to the data on it or the classes on it. But with siblings, you don't normally, or at least I don't normally think of them as affecting, you know, each other. So it's a little bit weirder if you change something about, you know, this one, right? And it affects this one. So, you know, one option is to actually just set this data on the parent, right? So I could set this stuff on the parent, and that actually wouldn't affect things too much. It would actually probably be fine. Actually, it's almost ideal, right? It's almost totally fine, because I do actually like this. This data does represent the entire timeline item. You know, this part, the text, the primary and secondary text, it doesn't really affect what the timeline item is. But this is like, this is the type of the item, and this is the size of the item. So it does kind of make sense that it would be a level up. Okay, so I think in my next video I'm gonna do that because it's getting late. It's 1:30 in the morning. I'm gonna quit here while I'm ahead. We've made good progress. Adding more timeline items. And I'll push that out, even though it's not 100% working yet. It's a good place to stop. It's always a good place to stop when you have a challenge ahead of you, especially one that's, you know, somewhat interesting and is going to improve your life in the future, you know, by working through it. Okay, so I feel pretty good about this. Yeah, I got a bunch of stuff able to be edited. the data is syncing. These other things are working. This isn't, auto expanding yet, but that's fine. I can fix that. We got mobile layout, which looks pretty nice. The editing, I guess it barely fits, but this one's not good. Or oh no, that does fit too. So it's not terrible on mobile. It actually probably would be. Yeah, I think for at least the first few months or even the first year, you're gonna want to edit your bundles, your like page on a desktop computer. Okay, so yeah, to delete. So that's a good to do. Okay, well, I will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in. It has been a pleasure and a blast. I'll see you next time.